I'm Rebecca Mitchell, 34 years old, and the youngest judge ever appointed in our district. Last Thanksgiving, my brother Thomas stood up at dinner and called me a disgrace to this family. He announced I would never be welcome in his home again. But at his wedding rehearsal a year later, something extraordinary happened. His bride-to-be Catherine spotted me across the room, gasped loudly, quickly curtsied, and said, "Your Honor, I didn't know you'd be here." The look on my brother's face was priceless. Before I tell you how this all unfolded, let me know where you're watching from in the comments and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had family drama turn into sweet vindication. Tom and I grew up in Westfield, Connecticut, in a sprawling colonial house with a perfectly manicured lawn that my father obsessed over every weekend. With a 5-year age gap between us, Tom initially took his role as big brother seriously. I have these golden-tinged memories of him teaching me to ride my first bike, running alongside me with his hand steadying the seat until I found my balance. He'd spend hours showing me how to play chess, his patience surprising our parents, who often commented on how he never showed that kind of restraint with anyone else. Our shared interests created a special bond. We would build elaborate forts in the living room, draping sheets over furniture, and spending entire Saturdays lost in our imaginary worlds. When I was 7 and he was 12, we started a summer reading challenge, competing to finish the most books before school started. He always won, but he'd help me find books I'd love, explaining words I didn't understand. Those early years established Tom as my hero. I followed him everywhere, trying to mimic his mannerisms and interests. My parents have this photo of us at the beach when I was about 6. Tom is demonstrating how to build the perfect sandcastle, and I'm watching him with complete adoration. That photo captured something essential about our relationship that would take years to change. Our father, Richard Mitchell, ran Mitchell Insurance, a business his grandfather had started and his father had expanded. It was the cornerstone of our family identity. The company's success afforded us a comfortable upper-middle-class lifestyle with country club memberships and summer trips to Martha's Vineyard. Dad worked long hours and expected the same dedication from Tom, grooming him to take over the business from an early age. Mom, Elaine, managed our home with the same precision Dad applied to business. She organized charity events, maintained our social calendar, and ensured we presented the perfect family image to the community. Her life revolved around supporting Dad's career and raising us according to strict expectations. Those expectations were crystal clear and distinctly gendered. Tom would attend Dad's alma mater, join the same fraternity, graduate with a business degree, and step into a leadership role at Mitchell Insurance. My path was equally predetermined but narrower. I would attend a respectable women's college, study education or nursing, marry well, and support my husband's career while raising children. These weren't just suggestions. They were the unspoken rules that governed our family. I remember Mom taking me to her women's club tea when I was 14, proudly introducing me as our future teacher. When I mentioned an interest in debate club instead of home economics, her smile tightened as she quickly changed the subject. The message was clear. Certain paths were acceptable for Mitchell women, and others were not. The cracks in my relationship with Tom began appearing during high school. While he dutifully followed the path laid out for him, I started questioning our family's rigid expectations. I joined the debate team and discovered I had a natural talent for crafting logical arguments and thinking on my feet. My history teacher, Mrs. Dawson, encouraged me to consider law, a suggestion that horrified my mother when I mentioned it at dinner. "Lawyers argue for a living," she said with a dismissive laugh. "No man wants a wife who argues." Tom was attending our father's alma mater by then, pledging the same fraternity, and absorbing their traditional values. During his visits home, I noticed a shift in how he spoke to me, less like the supportive brother I remembered, and more like a mini version of our father, condescending and corrective. The first major confrontation happened during my senior year of high school. I'd been accepted to both my mother's alma mater, Wellesley, and the State University, with a substantial merit scholarship. The decision seemed obvious to my family. Wellesley would provide the right connections and husband prospects. But the State University offered a pre-law program that excited me. When I announced my decision at dinner, Tom's reaction was immediate and harsh. "You're throwing away your future for some feminist fantasy," he said, echoing our father's dismissive tone. Mitchell women go to proper schools, not state colleges filled with nobodies. That night marked the first time I recognized that my brother was no longer my ally, but another obstacle I would need to overcome. While Tom received a new car for college and had his apartment, tuition, and expenses fully covered, my decision to attend state university meant I was largely on my own. I worked as a barista opening mornings before classes, tutored other students in the evenings, and picked up weekend shifts at a local bookstore. My schedule was punishing, but I was determined to prove my choice was valid. Despite working 25 hours a week, I maintained a 3.9 GPA and made the dean's list every semester. When I was inducted into Phi Beta Kappa in my junior year, my parents attended the ceremony, but seemed more confused than proud. Tom didn't come at all, claiming a business dinner couldn't be rescheduled. The law school application process during my senior year became another battleground. When my LSAT scores came back in the 98th percentile, opening doors to top-tier schools, my family's reaction was tepid at best. "Law school is expensive and difficult," my father warned. "And for what? To delay starting a family?" Tom was more direct during a rare phone call. "Lawyers are just professional arguers. Fitting for you, I guess. Always have to have the last word." I was accepted to several prestigious programs and ultimately chose Georgetown Law with a partial scholarship. When I called home with the news, my mother simply asked if I was sure I wouldn't rather come home and teach at the local high school instead. Tom didn't call to congratulate me at all. My first year at Georgetown was a brutal awakening. The workload was immense, the competition fierce, and my part-time job as a research assistant barely covered my living expenses. While my classmates often spent weekends networking at events or studying in groups, I was working additional hours to make ends meet. I learned to function on 4 hours of sleep, surviving on coffee and determination. Despite these challenges, I found my legal voice. Professor Abigail Martinez became my first real mentor, recognizing something in me that my family never had: a natural legal mind and unwavering work ethic. Under her guidance, I secured a spot on Law Review and excelled in the criminal defense clinical program, where I discovered my passion for representing those without resources or power. "You have a gift for this work, Rebecca," Professor Martinez told me after I won my first motion. "You see the humanity in your clients when others only see their mistakes." Meanwhile, Tom had graduated and immediately stepped into an executive position at Mitchell Insurance. His social media was filled with golf outings with clients, business dinners, and vacation photos from the Bahamas. Our lives were diverging rapidly, our values even more so. Holiday gatherings became exercises in avoidance. I declined Thanksgiving my second year, claiming exam preparation. In reality, I couldn't face another dinner of pointed questions about when I'd get this law thing out of my system and start a real life. When I did attend Christmas, Tom spent the evening describing his new BMW and recent promotion, occasionally throwing glances my way as if challenging me to match his achievements. "How's the student debt coming along?" he asked during dessert, knowing it was a sore point. "Dad says you'll be paying it off until retirement." After graduation, I shocked my family by declining offers from corporate firms to accept a position as a public defender. The salary was a fraction of what my classmates would be making, but the work aligned with my values. I wanted to represent people who couldn't afford justice, not corporations looking to maximize profits. Pro bono work is something you do on the side, not as a career, my father lectured when I shared my decision. Mitchell Insurance has excellent attorneys on retainer. I could have arranged something respectable. Tom's quick promotion to vice president of operations at the family company created an even starker contrast between our paths. At 28, he had a corner office, company car, and membership at the country club. At 23, I had a shared office in a government building, student loans, and a studio apartment in a questionable neighborhood. Holiday gatherings grew increasingly uncomfortable. Tom would hold court, sharing business successes and name-dropping local elites, while my parents beamed with pride. When conversation turned to my work, Tom often interjected with backhanded compliments. "Rebecca's doing charity work for criminals," he'd say with a smirk. "Very noble if not practical. Someone has to help those people, I suppose." My parents would nod in agreement, my mother adding, "We always knew Rebecca had unusual interests," as if my career choice were an eccentric hobby rather than meaningful work. 3 years into my public defender role, Tom brought Catherine Peterson to Christmas dinner. Catherine, Kate, as she preferred, was strikingly different from his previous girlfriends. Where they had been bubbly socialites eager to impress my parents, Kate was reserved, observant, and clearly intelligent. She asked thoughtful questions and actually listened to the answers, a novelty in our family gatherings. During a rare moment alone in the kitchen, Kate approached me while I was rinsing dishes. "Your brother mentioned you're a public defender," she said, helping me load the dishwasher. "I've always admired that work. What kind of cases do you handle?" For the next 15 minutes, we had the first genuine conversation I'd experienced in that house in years. Kate asked insightful questions about the criminal justice system and seemed genuinely interested in my perspective on legal reform. There was something refreshing about her lack of judgment. Our conversation ended abruptly when Tom appeared in the doorway, frowning. "Kate, my parents are asking about your family's summer home," he said, taking her elbow. "Let's not bore you with Rebecca's work stories." As Kate was led away, she glanced back with an apologetic smile. I allowed myself a small hope that perhaps, through Kate, there might be a path to reconnecting with my brother on more equal terms. My career took an unexpected turn when I successfully argued a landmark case challenging the constitutionality of certain mandatory minimum sentences. The case received significant media attention, putting me on the radar of the governor's Judicial Nomination Committee. At 33, I was shocked to receive a call about a potential district court appointment. The vetting process was exhaustive, every aspect of my personal and professional life scrutinized. After months of interviews, background checks, and hearings, I was confirmed as the youngest judge appointed to our district court. The local paper ran a front-page story highlighting my unconventional path and commitment to equal justice. I sent the article to my parents, hoping they might finally see value in my choices. My mother called with congratulations that felt hollow. "This is unexpected," she said. "Will you wear one of those black robes? I suppose it's a type of accomplishment." My father added, "It's not a private sector position, but government work has its benefits, I guess. Stability and all that." Tom's response came via text. "Congrats on the appointment. Must be nice having political connections." Or was it a diversity quota thing? Either way, good for you. The message confirmed what I'd long suspected. My brother would never see my success as legitimate or equal to his own. In his mind, any achievement outside the family business must have been handed to me rather than earned. The Thanksgiving after my appointment was the first family gathering since I'd become Judge Mitchell. Part of me wanted to skip it entirely, spend the holiday with friends instead of subjecting myself to the subtle digs and dismissive comments. But another part wanted to attend with my head held high, no longer the family disappointment, but a respected professional in my own right. After much deliberation, I decided to go. I prepared my mother's favorite cranberry relish recipe as my contribution and selected my outfit carefully. A burgundy cashmere sweater and charcoal slacks, professional but not showy. I even wore the pearl earrings my grandmother had given me, a small nod to family tradition. The drive to my parents' house was filled with anxiety. I rehearsed responses to the usual questions. Yes, I was still single. No, I wasn't concerned about my biological clock. Yes, the work was challenging but fulfilling. I reminded myself of the boundaries my therapist and I had discussed. I would not defend my life choices. I would not engage in arguments about my career, and I would leave if the situation became toxic. "You're a respected judge now," I told my reflection in the rearview mirror. "You don't need their approval anymore." The house looked exactly as it always had, perfect decorations, perfect table setting, perfect facade. My mother greeted me at the door with an air kiss, complimenting my earrings but frowning slightly at my outfit. "The sweater is lovely, dear, but wouldn't a dress have been more festive?" she asked, ushering me inside. My father offered a brief hug and immediately handed me a glass of wine, as if alcohol might make our interaction easier. Various aunts, uncles, and cousins were already gathered in the living room, creating a buffer I was grateful for. Tom and Kate arrived 20 minutes late, making a grand entrance. Tom wore an expensive suit despite the occasion's informality, and Kate looked uncomfortable in a dress that seemed more my mother's taste than her own. I caught her eye and offered a small smile, which she returned before Tom guided her to the opposite side of the room. Dinner seating was clearly strategic. I was placed between Aunt Meredith, who was hard of hearing, and Uncle Peter, who typically spent holidays discussing his golf game in excruciating detail. Tom and Kate sat near my parents, the placement reinforcing the family hierarchy. The first hour passed uneventfully. I answered polite questions about how work was going without mentioning specific cases or achievements. I asked about cousins' children and nodded through Uncle Peter's detailed description of his new putting technique. The tension remained beneath the surface, everyone playing their assigned roles in our family drama. The breaking point came unexpectedly during the main course. Uncle James, who lived in a different state and was less versed in our family dynamics, mentioned seeing my name in a national law journal. "Rebecca, I read about that corporate fraud case you presided over," he said, genuinely interested. "The article said your approach to sentencing was innovative. How do you determine appropriate consequences in cases like that?" Before I could answer, several relatives leaned forward, suddenly engaged. Cousin Jennifer asked about my courtroom experiences, and even Uncle Peter set aside golf talk to inquire about a recent Supreme Court decision. I found myself explaining my judicial philosophy, that justice should be both fair and rehabilitative when possible, and describing the challenges of maintaining impartiality while acknowledging human factors in each case. For once, I was being asked about my work with genuine interest rather than thinly veiled disapproval. From the corner of my eye, I noticed Tom's expression darkening with each question directed my way. He pushed food around his plate, jaw clenched, as our mother attempted to redirect conversation toward his upcoming wedding. "Kate's chosen such beautiful invitations," she interjected. "Tell everyone about the venue, dear." But Aunt Patricia inadvertently redirected attention back to me with what seemed like an innocent question. "Rebecca, with such a demanding career, have you had time to date? Any special someone we should know about?" #, the explosion. The question hung in the air for just a moment before Tom slammed his fork down, the clatter silencing all conversation. "Why are we pretending to care about Rebecca's life choices?" he demanded, voice rising. "My little sister is nothing but a disappointment to this family." The room froze. My mother's hand fluttered to her throat, but she said nothing. My father stared into his wine glass. "She rejected everything our family stands for," Tom continued, color rising in his cheeks. "Turned down proper schools for a state university. Chose to defend criminals instead of building something meaningful. And now everyone's acting impressed because some political appointment fell in her lap." He turned to face me directly, pointing his finger. "You've never respected our traditions or values. You think you're better than us with your fancy title and moral superiority. Well, I'm done pretending. You'll never be welcome in my home. You're a disgrace to the Mitchell name." The final words seemed to echo in the complete silence that followed. 20 faces turned toward me, expressions ranging from shock to embarrassment to morbid curiosity. #, immediate aftermath. My hands trembled as I carefully placed my napkin beside my plate. My face burned, and I could feel tears threatening, but years in courtrooms had taught me to maintain composure under attack. I would not give Tom the satisfaction of seeing me break. My parents sat motionless, their silence a tacit endorsement of Tom's outburst. Kate stared at her plate, visibly uncomfortable but equally silent. No one spoke in my defense or attempted to diffuse the situation. Without a word, I stood and gathered my purse and coat. I walked calmly to the door, back straight, chin up, the courtroom posture that had become my armor. Only when I reached my car did I allow the tears to fall, my hands shaking so badly I could barely insert the key in the ignition. The drive home passed in a blur of streetlights and suppressed sobs. I called my friend Melissa from the road, her steady voice the lifeline I needed. "Come straight here," she insisted. No one should be alone after something like that. That night, curled on Melissa's couch with a borrowed sweatshirt and a cup of tea, I made a decision. Family or not, I would no longer subject myself to people who couldn't recognize my worth. The ties of blood did not obligate me to accept abuse. For the first time, I allowed myself to acknowledge a painful truth. My brother hated me not for what I'd done wrong, but for what I'd done right. The days following Thanksgiving were a fog of hurt and confusion. I took a rare sick day, then another, unable to face even my courtroom where I was accustomed to being in control. When I finally returned to work, I moved through my calendar mechanically, present physically, but emotionally distant. Melissa and our mutual friend Daniel became my support system, dropping by with dinner, listening without judgment, and offering distraction when memories became too intense. After 2 weeks of emotional cycling between anger and grief, Daniel gently suggested I consider therapy. "You handle other people's problems with such clarity," he said. "Maybe it's time to let someone help you with yours." Dr. Sarah Levine specialized in family trauma and boundary setting. In our first session, she asked me to start a journal documenting my family interactions and my feelings about them. Looking back through years of holiday gatherings, a pattern emerged. I had been accepting subtle put-downs and dismissals for so long they had become normalized. "Your brother's outburst was extreme," Dr. Levine observed, "but it seems to be an escalation of existing dynamics rather than an isolated incident." Through weekly sessions, I began to understand that maintaining my relationship with my family didn't require sacrificing my self-respect. I crafted clear boundaries. I would not attend events where Tom was present. I would limit contact with my parents to brief, structured interactions, and I would leave immediately if anyone criticized my life choices. The holiday season arrived with invitations to my parents' Christmas dinner and New Year's gathering. For the first time, I declined both, spending Christmas with Melissa's family and New Year's at a colleague's party instead. The freedom from walking on eggshells was exhilarating. Unable to change my family situation, I redirected my energy into my professional life. I arrived at the courthouse earlier, stayed later, and immersed myself in case law during evenings and weekends. What began as distraction evolved into dedication. If my family couldn't see my value, I would ensure my work spoke for itself. I volunteered for the most challenging cases on the docket, particularly those involving complex legal questions or vulnerable populations. A case involving predatory lending practices against elderly homeowners became my focus, requiring extensive research into financial regulations and elder law. The attorneys appearing before me quickly learned I expected thorough preparation and ethical conduct, regardless of which side they represented. With the support of court administrators, I established a more efficient calendar system that reduced wait times and improved access for self-represented litigants. I rewrote form instructions in plain language, making the legal process more navigable for those without attorneys. These small changes earned appreciation from court staff and the public alike. My structured days left little time for rumination. I would wake at 5, exercise, review cases over breakfast, preside over court from 9 to 4, meet with clerks and staff until 6, then return home to research and writing. Weekends included volunteer legal clinics and mentoring law students. The routine was demanding but purposeful, each day reinforcing that I had chosen the right path despite my family's disapproval. 6 months after the Thanksgiving incident, I presided over a complex corporate fraud case that captured media attention. The CEO of a regional investment firm had defrauded clients of millions while maintaining a philanthropic public image. Rather than simply imposing the maximum sentence, I structured a judgment that included restitution to victims, community service and financial literacy education, and a graduated incarceration term tied to compliance with restitution payments. The sentence generated debate in legal circles. Some critics called it too lenient. Others praised its focus on tangible remedies for victims. The State Bar Journal requested an interview for their Innovative Approaches series, where I explained my philosophy that justice should repair harm where possible, not just punish wrongdoing. The profile, titled Judge Mitchell, Redefining justice from the bench led to an invitation to speak at the state judicial conference. Standing at the podium before hundreds of colleagues, I presented data showing that my approach had resulted in higher restitution completion rates and lower recidivism compared to traditional sentencing in similar cases. Shortly after, Georgetown Law invited me to deliver their commencement address. Standing at the podium where I had once sat as a student, I spoke about navigating personal challenges while maintaining professional integrity. Without mentioning my family specifically, I addressed the courage required to pursue justice even when facing opposition from those closest to you. The Legal Aid Society, where I had volunteered since my public defender days, presented me with their Distinguished Service Award, citing both my prior work representing indigent clients and my current efforts to make the court system more accessible to all. Each recognition reinforced what I had always known but struggled to believe. My value is not determined by my family's approval, but by the impact of my work on people's lives. As my professional network expanded, so did my personal support system. Monthly dinners with judicial colleagues evolved into genuine friendships, particularly with Judges Martinez and Washington, who had also navigated challenging family dynamics during their careers. Blood family is your first community, Judge Eleanor Harris, a mentor 30 years my senior, told me over coffee. But it doesn't have to be your only community, or even your primary one. You build family through chosen connections. Taking her wisdom to heart, I invested in relationships that offered mutual respect and support. Melissa and Daniel remained constants, but new friends entered my circle. Fellow judges, attorneys I respected, community advocates whose work intersected with mine. We celebrated birthdays and achievements together, created new holiday traditions, and supported each other through professional and personal challenges. I even cautiously began dating again, though nothing serious developed. A few dinners with a professor from the local university, coffee with an architect I met at a charity function, a brief connection with another judge from a neighboring district. None evolved into lasting relationships, but each interaction helped me recognize that I deserved respect and kindness, things I had rarely experienced in my family home. My apartment, once merely a place to sleep between workdays, became a sanctuary. I redecorated with artwork that brought me joy, created a reading nook by the window, and hosted small gatherings for my chosen family. For the first time since childhood, I felt truly at home. Despite my boundaries, I maintained minimal contact with my parents. Monthly phone calls with my mother became a carefully choreographed dance. She would mention community events and distant relatives. I would share sanitized versions of my professional activities. We avoided mentioning Tom or anything substantive about our lives. When I received a promotion to the appellate division, I sent my parents a formal announcement card rather than calling. My mother's response came in a similarly formal note. Congratulations on your continued success in your chosen field. Dad and I are pleased to hear of your advancement. Christmas and birthday cards arrived with generic messages and gift cards to department stores. Gestures of obligation rather than connection. I responded in kind, sending equally impersonal acknowledgments of their special occasions. My parents never directly mentioned the Thanksgiving incident or Tom's behavior. Their communications carefully skirted around any acknowledgement of the family fracture, as if ignoring it might somehow heal it. When they occasionally suggested lunch or dinner to catch up, I politely declined, offering instead to meet for coffee in public places where the brevity and neutrality of the encounter could be maintained. In one such meeting, my mother hesitantly mentioned Tom's engagement to Kate. "The wedding will be next June," she said, stirring her coffee without meeting my eyes. "At the Westfield Country Club. They've been planning for months." I nodded, offering a non-committal, "How nice for them," while bracing for an awkward invitation I would certainly decline. But my mother changed the subject, apparently as relieved as I was to avoid the question of my attendance. As a gesture of minimal goodwill, I sent an impersonal engagement gift, a crystal vase from their registry, delivered directly to their home with a standard congratulatory card signed simply, Rebecca. I expected no acknowledgement and received none. Nearly a year after the Thanksgiving incident, I returned home from court to find a thick cream envelope in my mail. The elegant calligraphy immediately identified it as something formal, a wedding invitation, perhaps, though I couldn't imagine who among my friends might be sending such traditional stationery. When I turned the envelope over, my stomach dropped. The return address read Thomas and Catherine Mitchell. I sank onto my couch, staring at the envelope as if it might explode in my hands. After several minutes, I carefully opened it, half expecting some kind of cruel message. Instead, I found a traditional wedding invitation, beautifully printed on heavyweight paper. Mr. and Mrs. Richard Mitchell request the honor of your presence at the marriage of their son Thomas Richard Mitchell to Catherine Elizabeth Peterson. The formal language continued, detailing the June ceremony at Westfield Country Club and reception to follow. Also enclosed was an invitation to the rehearsal dinner the evening before at Le Chateau, an upscale French restaurant. Most surprising was a small yellow post-it note stuck to the rehearsal dinner card, written in feminine handwriting. Hope you can come. Kate. No exclamation points, no effusive language, just a simple expression of hope that seemed to contradict everything Tom had declared at Thanksgiving. My first instinct was to call Melissa, who had witnessed the aftermath of Tom's outburst firsthand. They sent me a wedding invitation, I said when she answered, not bothering with a greeting. Both the ceremony and rehearsal dinner. What the hell? Melissa responded, her indignation immediate. After what he said, is this some kind of joke? We speculated about possible motivations. Perhaps my parents had insisted for appearance's sake. Maybe Tom wanted to seem magnanimous while expecting I would decline, or possibly Kate had pushed for reconciliation against Tom's wishes. Whatever the reason, Melissa concluded, you're not actually considering going, right? After he publicly called you a disgrace? I wasn't sure how to answer. Part of me wanted to throw the invitation away, send no response, and continue my life without the Mitchell family drama. Another part wondered if this might be an olive branch, awkwardly extended but genuine. And a small, childish part still longed for the big brother who had once taught me to ride a bike and build sandcastles. I'll think about it, I told Melissa, setting the invitation on my coffee table. For a week, I walked past it multiple times daily, sometimes picking it up, other times deliberately ignoring it. I brought it up in therapy, analyzing my conflicted feelings from every angle. There's no right answer, Dr. Levine said. The question is which choice best supports your well-being and values. Predictably, my mother called exactly 1 week after the invitation would have arrived. Did you receive Thomas and Catherine's invitation? She asked after our usual pleasantries. I did, I replied neutrally. Well, the expectation in her voice was unmistakable. I'm still considering my response. My mother's exasperation came through clearly. Rebecca, it's a simple RSVP. Your brother is getting married. Family obligations don't disappear because of one disagreement. One disagreement. I repeated, incredulous. He called me a disgrace to the family and said I would never be welcome in his home. That's not a disagreement, Mother. That's a complete rejection. He was stressed about work, she offered weakly. You know how your father puts pressure on him. When I didn't immediately respond, I heard shuffling on the line before my father's voice replaced my mother's. Rebecca, he said, his tone the same one he'd used when discussing serious matters throughout my childhood. This wedding is important to your mother. Having an empty seat where you should be will cause talk. The Petersons are very prominent in the community, and appearances matter. So this is about appearances, I said, unsurprised. Not about actual reconciliation. That's not what he began, but I interrupted. I'll consider attending. But I want to be clear, if I come, it will be on my terms. I won't pretend everything is fine for the sake of appearances, and I won't subject myself to any more public humiliation. The conversation ended shortly after, with my parents clearly dissatisfied but unwilling to push further. Their primary concern was clearly the social implications of my absence rather than the family rift itself, a reality that only reinforced my hesitation about attending. Despite my reservations, curiosity about Kate's role in the invitation gnawed at me. She had seemed so different from Tom and my parents during our brief interactions, more thoughtful, less concerned with status and appearances. Her note, though brief, suggested she genuinely wanted me there. On a whim, I searched for her on social media, something I'd never bothered to do before. Catherine Peterson's professional profile revealed something surprising. She worked as a clerk in the county courthouse, in the family court division. We had been in the same building regularly, without ever crossing paths. This new information shifted my perspective. Kate wasn't just marrying into the Mitchell family, she was part of the legal community. Her interest in my work during our kitchen conversations suddenly made more sense. She had professional context for understanding what I did. I discreetly asked a colleague who worked in family court about her. Kate Peterson? She's excellent, Judge Ramirez told me. Sharp legal mind, compassionate with families in crisis. Everyone respects her work ethic. Another casual conversation with the court administrator revealed more. She often references your rulings in procedural discussions, particularly that housing discrimination case last year. Seems to admire your approach. This intelligence gathering painted a picture of someone thoughtful and principled, qualities that seemed at odds with Tom's values, but aligned with what I had sensed about Kate. I began to wonder if she had advocated for my inclusion against Tom's wishes, perhaps seeing the wedding as an opportunity for family healing. With the RSVP deadline approaching, I needed to make a decision. I created a pro/con list, a technique that had served me well in complex legal cases. Pros of attending. Potential first step toward healing family relationships. Support for Kate, who seemed to want me there. Opportunity for closure or new understanding. Avoiding further family division. Demonstrating maturity and willingness to move forward. The cons of attending. Risk of additional public humiliation. Potential for confrontation with Tom. Tacitly accepting previous treatment as acceptable. Emotional stress of pretending everything is fine. Setting precedent that family can treat me poorly without consequences. I brought the list to my next therapy session, where Dr. Levine helped me explore each point more deeply. What's the worst that could happen if you attend? She asked. Tom could publicly humiliate me again. I answered immediately. And how would you handle that now compared to last Thanksgiving? The question made me pause. I wasn't the same person who had fled in tears a year ago. I had established boundaries, built a support system, and gained confidence in my worth independent of my family's approval. I would leave immediately, I said with certainty. I wouldn't stay to be mistreated. After further discussion, I reached a compromise. I would attend the rehearsal dinner only, not the ceremony or reception. The smaller event would allow me to gauge the situation and Kate's sincerity while limiting my exposure to potential conflict. If the dinner went poorly, I could skip the wedding without causing a scene. I sent my RSVP with a clear, polite note explaining my limited attendance. I will attend the rehearsal dinner but have prior commitments that prevent me from attending the ceremony. Congratulations on your upcoming marriage. Professional, respectful, but with clear boundaries, exactly the approach I had learned to take with difficult litigants in my courtroom. Le Chateau occupied a converted historic mansion on the outskirts of town, its stone facade illuminated by tasteful landscape lighting. I sat in my car in the parking lot, watching other guests arrive, familiar faces from childhood, business associates of my father, Tom's fraternity brothers with their polished wives. Each represented a world I had deliberately stepped away from, a community defined by appearance and status rather than substance. My fingers gripped the steering wheel as I considered driving away. No one had seen me yet. I could still avoid whatever awaited inside. But running would solve nothing. Whether this evening brought reconciliation or confirmed the permanence of our family fracture, I needed the clarity it would provide. I straightened my navy suit jacket, touched the small judicial pin on my lapel for courage, and checked my appearance in the rearview mirror. You belong here as much as anyone, I reminded myself. Your accomplishments are real. Your worth is not determined by their approval. 3 deep breaths later, I stepped out of my car and approached the entrance, consciously adopting the posture I used entering my courtroom, shoulders back, chin up, stride purposeful. Whatever happened inside, I would face it with dignity. The maitre d' directed me to a private dining room where cocktails were being served before dinner. As I entered, The first familiar face I encountered was Cousin Jennifer, who had always been kind even during family tensions. "Rebecca," she exclaimed, embracing me warmly. "I wasn't sure you'd come. It's so good to see you." Her genuine welcome created a small oasis of normalcy in what felt like hostile territory. As we chatted about her children and my recent move to a new apartment, I scanned the room, noting my parents speaking with Kate's family across the space. They had seen me arrive but made no move to approach. Other relatives offered awkward greetings, Aunt Patricia with an overenthusiastic hug that suggested guilt, Uncle James with a hearty handshake and mention of water under the bridge, various cousins with careful small talk that avoided any meaningful topics. Each interaction carried the weight of unspoken acknowledgement that something significant had happened, though no one dared name it. My mother eventually made her way to me, air-kissing my cheek and complimenting my suit with a hint of surprise, as if she had expected me to dress inappropriately. My father followed with a brief hug and immediate comment about the excellent scotch being served, clearly more comfortable discussing beverages than our relationship. "We've seated you with Jennifer and her husband," my mother informed me. "I thought you'd be more comfortable with them." The subtext was clear. I had been strategically placed away from the head table where Tom and Kate would sit with their parents. I was being included but kept at a safe distance. I was midway through a conversation with Jennifer when Tom entered the room. He wore an expensive tuxedo and the confident expression of someone accustomed to being the center of attention. His eyes swept the gathering, faltering momentarily when they landed on me. The shock on his face confirmed my suspicion. Despite the invitation, he hadn't expected me to actually attend. He quickly recovered, leaning to whisper something to our father before the two of them huddled with my mother in what appeared to be an intense discussion. Throughout the cocktail hour, Tom maneuvered around the room in a way that kept maximum distance between us. When the event coordinator announced it was time to be seated for dinner, I noticed Tom speaking with the staff, gesturing toward the table arrangements with obvious agitation. Moments later, a server approached to inform me there had been a seating adjustment. I had been moved to a table even further from the center of the room, now positioned near the kitchen entrance. The deliberate relegation should have hurt, but instead, I found it almost comically transparent. The brother who had once taught me chess was now using human beings as pieces, positioning me at the periphery of his perfect evening. I accepted the change with a gracious smile, determined not to give him the satisfaction of seeing me affected by such petty maneuvering. I had just taken my seat at the reassigned table when a commotion at the entrance caught everyone's attention. Kate had arrived, looking elegant but slightly flustered as she apologized to guests for her delayed appearance. Apparently, she had been addressing last-minute details with the wedding coordinator. As she moved through the room greeting guests, her gaze swept across the tables and suddenly locked with mine. The recognition in her eyes was immediate. She gasped audibly, her hand flying to her mouth in a gesture of genuine surprise. Before anyone could react, Kate changed direction and walked directly toward my table. The room quieted as guests noticed her purposeful movement, conversations tapering off into curious silence. When she reached me, Kate did something completely unexpected. She dropped into a small, deferential curtsy. "Your Honor," she said clearly, her voice carrying in the hushed room. "I didn't know you'd be here. It's such an honor to have you attend." The formality of her greeting, appropriate for a courtroom but startlingly out of place at a rehearsal dinner, created an immediate stir. Whispers erupted around us as guests tried to make sense of the exchange. Tom, across the room, appeared frozen in place, his expression a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. Kate straightened from her curtsy with a warm smile that seemed oblivious to the sensation she had created. "I've been clerking in family court for 3 years," she explained, taking the empty seat beside me without waiting for an invitation. "Your ruling on the Forster custody case last year completely changed how we approach parental alienation issues. Judge Michaels cites your opinion constantly." As Kate continued enthusiastically discussing legal precedents and court procedures, I realized she wasn't simply being polite. She genuinely admired my work and understood its significance in a way my family never had. "Tom never mentioned you were a clerk," I said when she paused for breath. Kate's expression flickered with something like embarrassment. He doesn't talk much about my work. I think he finds it uninteresting. She lowered her voice slightly. Between us, I fought hard for you to be included tonight. Tom was resistant, but I insisted that having a federal judge in the family is something to be proud of, not hidden away. The irony was almost too perfect. The woman my brother had chosen to marry valued exactly what he had rejected in me. As our conversation deepened, Kate revealed her own law school aspirations, currently on hold due to wedding planning and financial considerations. I'd love your advice sometime about applying to Georgetown, she said. Their public interest law program is exactly what I want to pursue. Across the room, Tom watched our animated conversation with visible discomfort, unable to intervene without creating an even more awkward situation. The power dynamic had shifted dramatically. No longer was I the family disappointment relegated to a back table, but an honored guest whose professional achievements commanded respect from his future wife. For the first time since Thanksgiving, I felt something loosen in my chest, not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the first step toward understanding that Tom's rejection had never been about my failures, but about his own insecurities. After dinner and speeches concluded, guests mingled over dessert and coffee. I was preparing to make a quiet exit when Tom approached my table, his expression carefully neutral. "Can we speak privately?" he asked, gesturing toward the terrace doors. The terrace overlooked immaculately landscaped gardens, now illuminated by strategic lighting that created pools of gold among the shadows. We stood silent for a moment, the sounds of the party muffled behind glass doors. "Kate seems to think highly of your work," Tom finally said, his tone suggesting this was somehow surprising. "She's very knowledgeable about the legal system," I replied evenly. "Something you never mentioned." He shifted uncomfortably, adjusting cufflinks that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "Look, I know things have been difficult between us." "Difficult?" I maintained my courtroom composure. "You called me a disgrace to the family in front of our entire extended family. You said I would never be welcome in your home." Those weren't random comments made in anger, Tom. They were calculated to hurt and humiliate me. His jaw tightened defensively. "You've always had a flair for drama." "I'm not being dramatic.
I'm stating facts."
If you invited me here to offer some superficial apology without acknowledging what you did, don't bother." Tom seemed genuinely startled by my directness. Perhaps he had expected the same sister who had once fled Thanksgiving in tears, not the judge who now faced conflict without flinching. "What do you want from me?" he asked, frustration evident. "Nothing," I answered honestly. "I didn't come here seeking anything from you. But if you're asking what would be required for any kind of relationship moving forward, I'd need a genuine acknowledgement of the harm you caused, a sincere apology, and evidence that you're capable of treating me with basic respect." Tom leaned against the stone balustrade, looking suddenly tired. For a brief moment, I glimpsed vulnerability beneath his carefully maintained facade. "I was jealous," he admitted quietly, the words seeming to surprise even him. "You were supposed to be the family failure, the rebellious one who couldn't follow the plan. Instead, you've built something meaningful entirely on your own, while I'm still trying to please Dad at 39. The admission hung between us, unexpected and raw. "Everything I have came with strings attached," he continued. "The job, the house, even social connections, all part of being Richard Mitchell's son. Nothing I earn myself." He looked directly at me for the first time. "But you walked away from all of it and succeeded anyway. Do you have any idea how that feels?" "That doesn't justify what you did," I said, unmoved by his attempt to center his feelings. "No, it doesn't," he agreed, surprising me again. "What I said at Thanksgiving was unforgivable. I am sorry, Rebecca. Truly." The apology seemed genuine, if belated. Tom explained that Kate had been horrified when he told her what had happened, that she had insisted on inviting me despite his objections, and that seeing her admiration for my work had forced him to reconsider his perspective. "She threatened to postpone the wedding if I didn't at least try to make amends," he admitted. "Said she couldn't marry someone who would treat family that way." While his motivation wasn't entirely internal, the acknowledgement represented more accountability than I had expected. Our conversation wasn't a magical healing of years of damage, but it opened a door that had seemed permanently closed. As Tom was called away to speak with Kate's parents, Kate herself appeared on the terrace, 2 flutes of champagne in hand. "Peace offering?" she suggested, extending one toward me. "I saw you talking with Tom and thought you might need this." We settled on a stone bench overlooking the gardens, the evening air carrying the scent of early summer blooms. "I should apologize," Kate said after a moment. "I was at that Thanksgiving dinner. I heard what Tom said, and I said nothing. I just sat there, horrified but silent." "You barely knew me," I offered. "It wasn't your responsibility to intervene." "Maybe not, but silence in the face of cruelty makes you complicit." She took a sip of champagne, then continued. "I've admired your work for years, you know. When Tom first mentioned his judge sister, I never connected it was you until I saw your photo on his parents' mantle." Our conversation flowed easily, revealing Kate's genuine interest in legal reform and public service, values much closer to mine than to the Mitchell family ethos. She spoke of eventually finishing law school, perhaps specializing in family law or juvenile justice. "Tom doesn't really understand why I'd want to pursue law when I could just stay home after we have children," she confided. "But I need purpose beyond family life. I thought maybe you could, I don't know, be a sounding board sometimes? Someone who understands both the legal world and the Mitchell family dynamics." The request created an unexpected bridge, the possibility of a relationship independent of Tom, based on shared interests and mutual respect. We exchanged phone numbers with plans for coffee the following week, a small step toward what might become a meaningful connection. As the evening concluded, the subtle shifts in family dynamics became increasingly apparent. My parents, who had observed my interactions with Kate and Tom throughout the night, approached with an awkwardness that suggested recalibration of their expectations. "You and Catherine seem to have a lot to talk about," my mother ventured, her tone carefully casual. "She's very knowledgeable about the legal system," I replied, echoing my earlier comment to Tom. "We have professional interests in common." My father cleared his throat. "Your court was mentioned in the paper again last week. Something about innovative probation requirements for white-collar offenders." The comment, while not exactly effusive praise, represented the first time he had acknowledged my professional achievements without qualification or comparison to Tom's career. I nodded, offering a brief explanation of the program without either downplaying its significance or seeking approval. As guests began departing, my mother hesitantly asked, "Will we see you at the ceremony tomorrow?" "No," I said firmly, but without animosity. "I have other commitments. But I appreciate being included tonight." The boundaries felt appropriate. I had taken a step toward potential reconciliation without compromising my self-respect or pretending the past hadn't happened. My attendance at the rehearsal dinner represented willingness to consider a new chapter in our family story, but only if that chapter included mutual respect and acknowledgement of past harm. "Perhaps we could have lunch next month," my mother suggested tentatively. "Just the two of us." The invitation, unlike previous attempts to re-establish contact, came without pressure or expectations. I agreed to consider it, recognizing that rebuilding trust would require small steps rather than grand gestures. That night, I added a new entry to the journal Dr. Levine had suggested I keep. Tonight was unexpected in every way. The brother who once called me a disgrace stood humbled as his fiancée curtsied and called me Your Honor. The parents who dismissed my career as a phase acknowledged its significance, however reluctantly. And I discovered something important about myself. I no longer need their approval to feel complete. A year ago, Tom's words devastated me because part of me feared he was right, that I had disappointed my family by choosing my own path. Tonight, I realized with absolute clarity that the disappointment was theirs to bear, not mine. My choices have created a life of purpose, integrity, and impact. If they cannot recognize its value, that reflects their limitations, not mine. Dr. Levine asked what I hoped to gain from tonight. I said closure, but what I found was something different, not an ending but a potential new beginning on more equal terms. I don't know if Tom's apology will translate to lasting change, or if my parents can ever fully accept my choices. But for the first time, I'm at peace with that uncertainty. The family we're born into shapes us, but doesn't define us. The values we choose, the boundaries we establish, and the authenticity we maintain, these determine who we become. I am proud of the woman I've become, regardless of whether that pride is reflected in my family's eyes. I closed the journal feeling lighter than I had in years. The journey from that Thanksgiving table to this moment had been painful, but necessary. I had discovered strengths I never knew I possessed, built relationships that nourished rather than depleted me, and established a life aligned with my deepest values. My phone pinged with a text from Kate. "Thank you for coming tonight." It meant everything. "Coffee next week still on?" I smiled as I replied affirmatively. Perhaps the most unexpected outcome of all this family drama was finding connection in the last place I would have looked for it, through the very person my brother had chosen to bring into our complicated family. The recognition, while sweet, was secondary to the true victory. I had found my voice, set my boundaries, and created a life of meaning on my own terms. No courtroom victory could compare to that achievement. Have you ever experienced a moment of vindication like Rebecca's, where someone who dismissed you is forced to recognize your worth? Share your story in the comments. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed Rebecca's journey from family disgrace to your honor. Subscribe to hear more stories of standing up for yourself, and hit that share button if you know someone who needs inspiration to create boundaries with difficult family members. Remember, sometimes the family you choose is more important than the family you're born into. Thank you for watching, and may you always find the courage to stand in your own power.